wish to welcome everyone to the 2021 Research and Scholarship Conference Faculty Roundtable discussion. I'm Clue Hansen, Coordinator for Undergraduate Research and Creative Endeavors at Western Carolina University, and I'm one of your hosts for this roundtable discussion. Before we begin, I wish to acknowledge the support of our sponsors. Many thanks to the Office of the Provost, Dr. Starnes, Dr. Brandon Schwab, the Graduate School, Dean Kloppel, and Dr. Joy Bowers Campbell, and to the Brinson Honors College and Dean Jill Granger. Their support of research and creative endeavors at Western Carolina University is why we can host this conversation today with our faculty. So now allow me to hand it over to my co-host, Dr. Nelson Granda Marulanda, to introduce himself and his research and get the conversation started today about sustainability and progress in the midst of a pandemic and from the perspective of our Western Carolina faculty and community.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for that introduction. My name is Nelson Granda. I'm going to be co-hosting this discussion, and I am an assistant professor in the School of Engineering and Technology, and I do a lot of research and activities related to green energy and energy production.
Thank you, Nelson. I would like now to set the stage for our audience on what our conversation format will look like today. We have brought together an amazing group of scholars here, faculty at Western Carolina University, to have a discussion about sustainability and progress, even in the midst of a pandemic. And what we are attempting to achieve here is an open and honest, a non-scripted conversation that encourages our reflection, our connection, and perspectives on how our faculty and how their research or creative endeavors continue to push the needle forward on progress and sustainability, even in the midst of a pandemic. So I would love to welcome and will provide time for each of our faculty to introduce themselves to our panelists today. So we have Dr. Amy Rockhill from the Department of Geosciences and Natural Resources. We have Aaron Adams from the School of Art and Design. We have Dr. Jennifer Schiff from the Department of Political Science and Public Affairs. We have Dr. Chana De Silva from the Department of Chemistry and Physics. We have Heather May Erickson from the School of Art and Design, and we have Dr. Sarah Duncan from the School of Health Sciences. And so what I'd like to do is go ahead and hand it over to our faculty to introduce themselves. So why don't we take it from the top? Amy, why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself, briefly describe for us any current or recent projects that you have been working on, and how you might find your work or your projects connect with our topic of sustainability and progress.
Hi, I'm Amy Rockhill. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Geosciences and Natural Resources. I mostly study vertebrate populations and how they use the landscape, so how they use it both through space and through time. So I think sustainability for me in its simplest form is how kind of the wise use of our resources in a way that allows us to replenish them or have them available for future generations. And especially out here, a big part of that is our national parks. And we have these vast landscapes of open land. And so understanding how animals use our developed lands and how that may impact their movements, or where they're currently using the landscape that's not developed, and being able to focus in on areas to put into conservation or keep into conservation as we continue to develop is pretty important for me.
Thank you, Amy. Aaron, I'll move to you now.
Hi, everybody. I'm Aaron Adams, and I'm the program coordinator for the interior design program at Western. Sustainability is a big piece of what we teach our interior design students. And for me personally, it's been an area and focus of my research as far as sustainable construction and design methodologies. Everything from the utilization of readily available surplus materials like shipping containers or straw bale construction or rammed earth, all of these different sustainable methodologies that we can do one home at a time, tiny home living, downsizing, trying not to mar the landscape quite as much by building the built environment on it. So these are all the different parts that go into what we teach our students to be responsible design. And it's also a large part of where I have focused my area of research. We've done a lot of projects, both on my own individually, but also bringing sustainability and design into the classroom. And so we've done several projects, community-based projects, service learning projects, experiential learning, where they are actually designing small home communities for affordable housing, which again speaks to some of the things that we'll be speaking about today with equitable living and all of those different parts. So I'm excited to be here and talk about that today.
Fantastic, Erin. Thank you so much. Jen, I move to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Schiff. I am a faculty member in the Political Science and Public Affairs Department. And specifically, I study water policy around the world. So I teach international politics, and that's why my focus is really global. So I look at the water policies of different countries that have agreed to recognize the human right to water and sanitation. I examine those policies, I assess what's working and maybe what's not, and then I try to suggest means of improving policy implementation. And this is a really critical problem because there are about 2.2 billion people in the world that do not have access to clean water within 30 minutes of their home. So my whole goal here is to just see what governments are doing to try to solve this problem and assess how useful those policies are and how they can be improved. And in terms of defining sustainability, this is very applicable, this particular panel to me. I work directly with Sustainable Development Goal 6 in terms of how I define sustainability, because that's how governments define water sustainability. And so all the Sustainable Development Goals come with a specific set of indicators. And those indicators are a set of metrics that allow governments to measure how well they're performing against each of the goals. And so I use the metrics from SDG 6 in my own work when I'm trying to assess the policies of countries. And in terms of something I'm currently working on, for an example of kind of what I do, I'm currently working on a paper that examines India's implementation of a massive national policy to build a stronger sanitation infrastructure. So it's called the Clean India campaign. And as part of the campaign, the Indian government has built, not an exaggeration, 103 million toilets and houses over the past 5 years. If you look back, like in 2014, I think about 40% of rural households in India had toilets on premises. And today it's about 71%. And so that falls directly within this human right to water and sanitation. There are SDG 6 indicators that apply specifically to sanitation levels. And so my work right now is just trying to assess this policy and see its successes and failures and to see if it can be scaled up or down in different contexts.
Fascinating. Thank you, Jen. Chana, I move to you now.
All right. I am Chana De Silva. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Chemistry and Physics. I do chemistry research in the fields of nanotechnology, biomedical, and computational chemistry areas. So the goal is to enhance students' research experience in the novel fields and demanding fields within bio-nanotechnology, focusing on developing new nanomaterials for cancer imaging, and also antimicrobial type agents for minimizing bacterial infections. What we do here is to develop student experience and develop their skill sets so then they are ready for industry or higher education in chemistry related fields. So if I talk about sustainability, to me, it's giving a quality education to all of the students. And also, if you talk about gender equality and also women in sciences, and then helping or facilitating the minorities and underrepresented students in sciences, it's something I believe that we need to be working on. And also my research tied up with the sustainability is going towards industry innovation, economic growth. And last thing is what we call green chemistry, where we are trying to do sustainability in using materials and make materials for the benefit of the society, but with no or minimum pollution at the molecular level. So that's environmental aspects that we need to be talking about.
Well, that is very interesting and sounds like a very challenging endeavor at the molecular level. I hope we can hear more about that. Heather May, I leave it to you now.
Hi, Heather May Erickson. I am an associate professor in the School of Art and Design, and I specialize in ceramics. And sustainable actions within ceramics, we often discuss technical things. Actually, Sarah came in right before the pandemic, and we did some air quality tests in ceramics, and thinking about water, our topic of the campus this year. Wastewater is one of the things that we deal with in ceramics, and how we deal with keeping our waterways safe. That's one of the ways that we think about sustainability in ceramics. It's not a truly green area, so we're always thinking about ways to save the earth and make things better. In the past, we've partnered with the Jackson County Green Energy Park in the waste veggie oil initiative for firing kilns and other things like that. So Nelson, it was great to hear your introduction. Aside from some of those ideas in sustainability, I'm working with ideas of wholehearted classrooms and inclusive excellence, self-awareness, authenticity, community building, artist, citizen, service learning and community engagement ideas, and social justice and equity and gender equality ideas with higher ed educators and researchers to create create a new dialogue in the classroom and a new approach to the ways of getting students to learn who they are and who they want to be as makers and communicators in the world. I'm also working on my own body of work that is influenced by the LGBTQ+ community, and have created a body of work called Pride Pots, and hopefully you'll be able to see some of that work later on the website.
Truly inspirational work. I follow you on Instagram, as you know. Really just amazing artistry and craft in your process there, and I can't wait to hear more about it. I want to give it over to Sarah, certainly not last but not least on our list. Sarah, take a moment to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Duncan, and I am an assistant professor in the environmental health program in the School of Health Sciences. So environmental health really is sustainability. It's about creating environments that are going to sustain us as a human population, that are healthy for the long term. And so everything that I do really kind of surrounds that idea. We do a lot of work with environmental justice, really getting our students involved in addressing environmental issues in our communities. And in particular, my expertise is on air quality. And there are a couple projects that I'm working on, one of which is to install a university-wide air quality monitoring system so that we can really understand how the activities that we engage in every day here in Cullowhee really impact our environment and how that environment impacts our own health. So hopefully that will be installed this year. Look out for that. There'll be an announcement coming, I'm sure. I'm also engaged in some early work to work with some high school students at the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians Central Schools, and engage them in a project where they're going to take these little air beams. They're little air monitors around, hopefully, if it's something that we can get up and running, and try to help them better understand their exposures, especially as they relate to air pollution and asthma. And this will be both using Western science methods and traditional ecological knowledge methods through storytelling, digital storytelling, picture taking. And we know as scientists that kind of using both the social sciences and the hard sciences together to really solve these problems is so crucial. And one last project that I'm working on is called Design for Health. And this is a project where we're engaged in our local community and addressing the built environment, especially for our neighbors and community members that are living in poverty, and trying to help them have healthier homes that work for them in a variety of manners. So I'm looking forward to chatting more about that.
That sounds amazing. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you again to everybody on the line here joining us for this conversation. So what we want to do is we want to transition into some pointed topics and take that opportunity for you, the faculty scholars, to elaborate more fully on what you have already introduced us to and piqued our interest in. So with that, let's start with topic number one. And I think that this one is a natural first starter for us. Topic number one is cultural awareness, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and peace and justice. Nelson, very quickly, how many of the goals, if you can remember off the top of your head, are encompassed in this first topic?
Yes, there's a lot of the goals that are related to this theme number one. I will say that goal number one, goal number two, goal number 5, goal number 16, peace and justice. Actually, a lot of them, because when we talk about the goals, all of them are interrelated somehow. We cannot tackle one without affecting some or 2 or 3 or 4 other goals together.
It's a really good point. So again, in our conversation with the faculty today, let's see where that interconnectedness may take us in the conversation. But for our audience and for our faculty, just to set the stage a little bit within the framework of the United Nations data that has been provided about these goals and this topic, we want to acknowledge the fact that despite positive signs of reduced inequalities around the globe, inequality is actually growing for more than 70% of the global population. The UN contends that to reduce these inequalities, it will require transformative action across the economic, social, political, and environmental spheres. That for that transformative action to work, we as a community, as a global community, must include marginalized populations in the action or policy decision-making process. And then, I think this is really important too, that education is a key to that. Education helps reduce inequalities and reach gender equality as a global community. This is going to be an important cornerstone if we are going to foster substantial change and tolerance and more peaceful societies. So with that stage kind of being set, with that data provided by the UN, I'd love to start with Heather May and get your take, Heather May, on how you feel your scholarly perspectives and work fits into this. And I'd love to hear more about the connection you're drawing with the classroom and with students, not only your work as a ceramicist.
So I guess it was when just before the pandemic began, I would say January of last year, I started to feel like something was missing in my life, and there wasn't a balance. And I was trying to figure out what my goals were. I received tenure last year in about basically when COVID happened. And I just started doing some deep diving into myself, basically. And through that research, it is kind of snowballed into what I was talking about in the introduction. And it was really introduced to me through Dr. Brene Brown from the University of Houston and her research on teaching and leadership and wholehearted lifestyle, basically. So she is a researcher, storyteller, an academic, and her work is really based in grounded theory research and qualitative research and storytelling. And that really helped me to start to understand the people that I'm working with and the students. So from that, and looking at some of her online resources for the Daring Classrooms and Dare to Lead, if you haven't read any of her books, Dare to Lead is a really, really great book. That has helped me to kind of pull out and tease out some exercises in the classroom to get students to look inside themselves and figure out who they want to be, to use their personal stories, that storytelling thing. And that's what we use basically to create art, is using our stories, putting ourselves into our art making. And if the students don't know who they are, it's really difficult for them to articulate through the artwork their ideas to the world. So we break things down for them to get to know themselves, to be in the classroom and feel like they can be authentic, their authentic selves in the classroom and not hide things. I myself have recently felt like I've been hiding bits of myself potentially in being who I think that the academic institution wants me to be or needs me to be, and also in my own personal work and research and scholarship. So in breaking down those kind of projects, I started to feel like I wanted to have a community that I could speak to and engage with globally. So I created the Facebook group, Wholehearted Classrooms, for higher education educators and researchers in the arts, and just started inviting a ton of friends that I know around the globe. And just this morning, I had one of my first really great conversations with a professor from Fort Hays State University in Kansas, where she is a ceramic professor, and started seeing my research through the Wholehearted Classroom Facebook page, and wants to bring me in to start talking about cross-disciplinary collaborations with these ideas within their institution as well. So it's really great because Sarah brought up the Design for Healthcare, and I'm going to bring Professor Shelby Hicks in, who is an interior design professor, to have conversations about empathy, because they're working on the project from the standpoint of empathy. So I'm trying to pull in some of our institution faculty that I know that are working on some of these ideas of inclusive excellence and the Wholehearted Classrooms, and connect with people around the globe.
Heather May, and it just in what you've articulated, you're also talking so pointedly about that last SDG goal, about that partnership, right? And the importance of partnerships. And I think that that's a perspective we've got to hold on to, right? That, you know, that old saying, no man is an island. Well, you know, when we want to make progress, it's not happening by ourselves in our silos. It means mashing up, it means collaborating, and it means building partnerships. Jim?
Exactly. Yeah. And I've partnered with Aaron before, and you know about that. And, you know, hopefully in the future, Nelson and I got together. And it's these kinds of conversations where we start to see the connections of the cross-disciplinary threads. Like Chana is talking about the STEM, you know, and we always want to add the A for the arts in there as well, so that we're not left aside, because I teach a lot about ceramic art design and craft as well. And there's intersections with STEAM in that conversation.
I think I want to add also some, I think I have here a lot about when we hear about education as being the cornerstone for talking about Team One and some of the goals that we have seen. And I think all of us are part of this community in Western, that we follow the mission of Western, where they're trying to incorporate teaching, research, service, engagement, and we want to help grow all the students together into become agents of change for future generations. So when we see the sustainability definition for each one of you, there's a big overlapping, and I think the best way of seeing this is we want to have our needs accomplished, or we want to meet our needs without affecting any of the needs of future generations that are coming in the next few years.
That's a really important point. Any other comments or additions to Heather and Heather May and Nelson?
I think.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Chana.
Okay, I think that developing collaborations across the disciplines, like Heather talked about, would be another thing that we need to improve. Like, for example, if we can have some collaborations with science and arts, working on different projects, different aspects of the project, that would help to build up the community, as well as the students to see the interconnection between different disciplines and how we work. Because when they get out of this place, they're going to go to the real world, and then it's all mixed up there. So you need to be able to work in that type of a situation.
That's definitely true. Yesterday, I talked to a student who wants to do an honors project. And I asked her, I said, what other things are you interested in? And she said, well, I'm into chemistry. And I was like, oh my gosh, ceramics is chemistry. So we started to talk about glazes and raw materials, and I was pointing all that out. And I said, who are you studying with in chemistry? Bring them into the conversation, and maybe we can do a cross collaboration honors project. So I really embrace that, Chana.
Yeah, I think it's very important that nowadays in our world, we stop looking at disciplines as silos, right? We stop looking at silo vision of this is where I am and that's what I'm doing. And we start to enhance that interconnection and that partnership between other disciplines. I work with Morgan Kennedy from the arts department as well. And when we do a lot of precious plastic, no more precious plastics, new plastics, trying to incorporate a little bit of engineering into how do we do recycling, but the goal is to create art at the end of the day. So it's that interconnection that we need to enhance more in our community.
I think if I could add to that just a little bit, I think a few things that WCU does that kind of helps foster that a little bit is one of the liberal studies courses. So when we teach our science courses to non-science majors, I love those courses because we get such a diverse perspective, and we see students that we don't see every day in our own program, and we get access to those honors projects like you're talking about. But then even just having the students walk into different buildings and have their classrooms in different buildings. I had a student 2 years ago knock on my door, and he'd seen our posters, which everybody puts their student posters on the walls, right? And you don't realize how many students actually stop and look at those. And so this student was interested in wildlife and just knocked on my door and wanted to have a conversation about it. And I was in the process of getting these collars, which are very expensive, in the $thousands range. And he ended up being in the College of Engineering and was talking about a capstone project. And I said, hey, if you ever want to do a capstone project on how to make one of these for me really cheap, let me know. And so he actually talked to his faculty member. And this past year, I've had 2 students, one working on coming up with an affordable GPS collar, one group, and another group working on a drop-off mechanism, because these have to come off the animal some way. And they've done a fantastic job. And it's been such a great collaborative way of working together. But if we didn't have the students moving around the university as much as they are, that never would have happened. I wouldn't have had the foresight to reach out and know that there is an engineering capstone to say, hey, you guys want to work on this. So it's just worked out well.
That is an amazing example. Jen, to you.
Sorry. I agree. I mean, I one of the things I'm so inspired by is the integration of the different disciplines on campus, of course, in my classes, and then within the SDGs themselves. So I was lucky enough this year in the fall, I taught a global water politics class, which is like totally up my alley, right? That's specifically what I study. And then this semester, I'm teaching a global environmental politics class, which covers all of the issues, not just water. And I'm lucky enough to have both environmental science students and political science students and international studies students. So a really nice mix of people in there with different perspectives, all coming together to talk about issues. It's one of the reasons I really enjoy studying environmental policy, because it is interdisciplinary by its very nature. It's not just about the policy, but what is the policy based on? It's based on the science often. And so, or it should be, and it often is. And so, yeah, and then the SDGs integrate so well with that. I mean, in class, when we talk about lack of water, we're not just talking about SDG number 6, which is the one that has to do directly with water, but the lack of water also leads to poverty. It leads to inequality. Women and children spend hours a day, for instance, gathering water when they have to go, walk miles from their home to pick up water and bring it back. And it is usually women that are doing that work, and often children. The average distance globally to go gather water is something like 3.7 miles each way. So if you're spending all day walking to go get water and then coming back, what are you losing the opportunity to do? You're losing the opportunity for an education. And since it does affect women disproportionately, that's SDG number 5, I think, which is the gender equality SDG. So that relates directly to it. Without water, you can't have food. And that relates directly to SDG number 2. Which is the zero hunger. So yeah, it all comes together so beautifully. And I think on campus, we reflect that with all the different disciplines, with all of the students and all of their interests. And it's a good mix.
Well, I think that transitions us so nicely into our second topic for this hour, which is sustainable progress and future innovation. And Nelson, help me out again. What goals are we essentially looking at that encompass this topic with the SDGs?
Yes, so for theme number 2, we are focusing a little bit more into SDG number 7, 8, 9, 11, and 12. But we are also incorporating a little bit of 13, 14, 15. So I'm gonna so like I mentioned before, they are super interconnected. If we're looking into this theme number 2, we're talking about affordable energy, innovation, new technology, reduction in consumption, sustainable cities, how we are incorporating sustainability in our communities. But at the same time, we need to be taking care of all the other goals, so we are going to be able to succeed in support, and like Jen mentioned before, to be able to metric and try to track measurements that are going to be positive effects into each one of these goals.
So thank you, Nelson, to provide us that connection. So to set the stage for our next conversation, just some points to consider. Rapid urbanization means that 4 billion people, that's over half the global population currently, faces worsening air pollution, inadequate infrastructure and services, and the effects of unplanned urban sprawl. Currently 2.2 billion people worldwide. Jen, this goes to the fact I believe you mentioned earlier, still lack safely managed drinking water or sustainable water management in their communities. And so we need to have this conversation about how to better manage our production of food and energy and contribute to those decent work and economic growth conditions. And then lastly, if we're thinking about this energy consumption here, burning carbon fuels, coal, oil, gas, that produces large amounts of greenhouse gases, which cause climate change and does have harmful impacts on our people's, our human species well-being and the environment. So to kickstart this topic, I think, Aaron and Sarah, I really want to hear from y'all around this topic. And Aaron, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you with this first point about rapid urbanization and how your tiny living might be a sustainable solution and an innovative solution to those challenges spurred on by that urbanization.
Absolutely. And you make a fantastic point. On so many levels, downsizing the way that we live in our built environments touches upon so many different pieces of what it means to be sustainable. So again, protecting the Earth's resources, the finite resources particularly, is a very easy thing to do when you are building smaller, maybe you're reusing materials in the construction process. And we have had student projects, as well as some of the projects that I've worked on, that speak to that, whether you're using straw bale construction methodologies. And as this technology is growing, the communities, our surrounding communities, including Jackson County, is now starting to approve those codes so that we are able to build with hay bale construction or tightly packed rammed earth in recycled tires. That's now a method of construction that we here can use in Jackson County. Shipping containers, tiny homes on wheels, which is where I'm living at the moment. But we have students that have gotten so interested in this simply because of the passion and excitement that myself and the rest of my faculty have, because it is contagious when you start talking about that excitement. So we've had our interior design students partnering with social work students as well, with Dr. Amy Murphy Nugent. And we have had them working together on a project in Maggie Valley that is creating a small community for affordable housing. Again, speaks a little bit to sustainability, but also evening out some inequities. And we had this project, it's right in the middle of the development phase now, but they have chosen 2 of our student design projects to build very small micro houses with community gardens so that you're able to build relationships with the people you're living in that community with. And construction is slated to start soon on that. So we've got all of these different parts of sustainability, and not just about materials and resources, but also about building homes that are healthy for the end users and the occupants. So whether you're talking about access to daylighting, and then of course where Sarah comes in with healthy air, so using materials that are low in volatile organic compounds, doing things that don't exacerbate asthma. There's a lot of different ways in which designers can contribute to the whole discussion and have a big impact on sustainability from a lot of different avenues.
That is amazing. And I just love the fact that 2 of the Western students have had their designs accepted for this project. This is amazing. That means that again, Catamounts are putting a stamp, an appropriate sustainable stamp on the earth. I love it. I think it is just a prime example of, again, those local regional partnerships that aren't just here on campus, that do show up in our cultural landscape across our region. Sarah, do you have any thoughts on this topic and these concerns, these data points from the UN?
Absolutely. So just to put it kind of into context, air pollution, oftentimes people don't really think that much about it, but it's actually the 4th leading cause of death, or at least the 4th leading risk factor for death in the world after high blood pressure, smoking, and high blood sugar. It causes about 5 million deaths yearly. So this is a really big deal. And it's something that really hasn't gotten a lot of attention, or nearly as much attention as it should. And especially as urbanization kind of continues, what do we have? We have more people coming together using their cars or motorcycles or whatever to get to the same high density places. And so thinking about Nelson's work and, green energy, and so kind of building in different ways to actually come together and transport ourselves around the globe. Cullowhee Valley is a valley. It traps air pollution. If you've ever come down the highway, kind of coming into campus from Silva, you, on a cold day especially, you will see kind of this layer of pollution over everything. So kind of using my project, which I'm working with a couple of students and people across campus, and really kind of understanding that better. And then also really helping students advocate for different policies and procedures on campus to reduce the number of cars that are coming to campus, for example. In addition, as Erin was talking, homes, we breathe most of our breaths indoors. Unless you work outside, you're probably spending most of your time inside, especially in the developed world. And so looking at clean building materials that don't have a lot of volatiles, improving the wood stoves in our homes so they're not super leaky. Really, all of this kind of goes into both sustainable as our own health and kind of keeping us going as a people, and as well as building in more of those different technologies where we can have energy that isn't dirty and isn't polluting our air.
Truly insightful. Let me just throw this out there to you and to Jen and Erin. What do y'all think are maybe the biggest impediments to improving some of the quality access points to these important resources, quality air, quality well-managed water, access to habitable homes and living spaces?
I think one of the biggest problems in creating the accessible, healthy spaces, healthy homes, healthy environments for people is currently it's the inequities about with money. It's the fact that if you're looking for affordable housing, that housing traditionally is not going to be very well ventilated. It is not going to have, a mechanical breathing system in an ERV in that home for you. Chances are it's not going to have an updated air conditioning or heating system, if it even has that. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge that we face today, is that the housing that is available and affordable for all are generally not the best setups for indoor air quality, for good indoor air quality. So I think that's a huge piece to getting it equitable across the board, where everyone can have access to both affordable and healthy housing. I think that's a big stumbling block for us.
In terms of water access, it's the same. Globally, in international policy, we call it capacity. And a lot of states, especially in the developing world, don't have the capacity to implement these policies. They may want to, they have the desire to, but do they have the economic or financial strength to? Often not. Sometimes they don't have the governing system that allows for these types of policies. So it's one thing to want to provide everyone with water, but it's another thing to actually have the ability or the capacity to do it. And that's the biggest obstacle faced internationally, certainly.
I would like to add something to what you all said. I mean, what you all are doing is really great. I see that. I just wanted to add something as a scientist, how to tie this sustainability and future innovation. I think our next generation, our students, should learn how to do new technological developments so that we can minimize the air pollution. And for example, Jen talked about drinking water. So maybe reusing drinking water, can we develop technologies that you can filter good air filtering, the water filtering systems, so that you can reuse water. So I think what we do here in the chemistry department with some other faculty members as well, we try to develop new technologies for like water purification. So developing new technologies, using nanomaterials to filter water, and then can we make it drinking water? So we are not there yet, but my point is, I want students, this new generation, to start thinking about that, and then at least at their undergraduate level, start developing something that can be developed in the future. So I think technology has to change for a sustainable and a world, and a future innovation should come into the picture here. So that's, I think, extremely important. Like, I know Nelson does something related to that too. So I think we should train our students with the mindset that having that, how we can have this sustainability in the world. Like, for example, air pollution is a big issue. So now, as chemists, as engineers, I'm pretty sure we are trying to see how we can develop new products with minimum damage to the environment. So that's one thing I mentioned earlier. Green chemistry is one method. We are trying to develop the products like, things you need day-to-day life: shampoo, paint, clothing, dyeing the clothes. All those things would do some damage to the environment, but we need them. But now it's the time to think about innovative ways to do the same thing without any pollution. So that's another technological thing that we should be developing, and that's what we are doing as part of our research.
That's great introduction, Shanna. I want to add there that we need to think about bringing those innovation to the general public, right? And the one thing that connects sustainability and the 3 Ps, like I was mentioned before, is we want to have positive change to help the planet, to help people. But the only way that we can do this is if we are able to generate profit, right? Companies will not be willing to fabricate anything or to invest in anything if they don't see any profit. So like Shanna is saying, we need to make our students understand that they need to create new things, they need to be innovative, but at the same time, they need to think how they can bring these new products into successful production and useful to be able to help all the other goals, like filtering water or filtering air or any of the other issues that we're talking here.
I think, is it appropriate to throw a COVID bit in here?
100%, yes.
I think in general, when we're talking about sustainability and development and gaining support for it, I think COVID, perhaps at least in this region, ended up being a bit of a positive turn on that, in the sense that for any of you that went out and tried hiking, we've hiked ever since we moved here 5 years ago. And when we were all locked down, oh my goodness, you could not get on any of those trails. We went to hiking trails that it was just miles and miles of cars. And, my first feeling was, oh, I came here to get away from people, right? Like, I don't want to, especially with COVID, I don't want to breathe in their air. I want to be somewhere on my own. But in hindsight, a few months later, we ended up finding just kind of smaller trails, off the beaten path trails, but those trails were just packed from people all over the place. And I think the good that's going to come out of that is all these people that were shut in their houses and ended up going out and exploring and realizing how much they needed this natural environment and how much it benefited them to get out and just de-stress and explore. In the wildlife world, we're losing hunters every single year. Our hunting population's declining, and that's where a lot of those funds come from. So a lot of the funds for the parks, for the state parks, et cetera, come from fees and taxes that are put on ammunition, firearms, et cetera. And so when those funds are declining, we need some sort of other revenue. And I really hope that if something good that comes out of COVID is generating that support and being able to find means to generate those fees and improve conservation in other ways.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, Amy. You conjured up that little factoid about the national parks that 90% of people who visit the parks don't venture more than a mile off the paved road. And now we're seeing, hopefully, that people are exploring those national treasures in a way, and gaining a new insight and new perspective of their value as part of sustainable progress. And like you said, in future innovation, when we're thinking importantly and purposefully about conservation efforts and engaging populations that have not traditionally been engaged in those efforts. And I speak from my familial experiences, coming from a family of both hunters and conservationists, and sometimes at the Thanksgiving table, it proves for interesting conversations. But now, that change language is a part of the conversation, bringing people of opposite ends of the ideological spectrum together, if that makes any sense at 3:49 on a Friday afternoon. Anybody else on this topic before we transition to our last? All right, so our last topic for our conversation today, and I hope that we'll be able to save a little bit of time here at the end to really tie this back together with our thoughts on the pandemic and how we're going to move forward, is the topic of health and well-being and the importance of partnerships and regional impact and engagement. And I think that this goes to the front end of the conversation today, where we were talking about how important those partnerships are and getting out of our silos to think about this change. And I think it's important for us, again, to think about this from that geographic scale, the local to the global. To set the stage a little bit, the pandemic has shown that rich and poor countries alike can have a health emergency, and that health emergency can push people into bankruptcy or poverty. We want to acknowledge the importance that healthy people are the foundation for healthy economies and economic growth. Economic and social progress over the last century has been accompanied by severe environmental degradation, and that is endangering the very systems on which our future development and survival depend. And endangering that natural fauna and flora has got to be addressed soon. And so, in light of the consequences of this global pandemic with COVID-19, we have seen signs of strengthening multilateralism and global partnerships. But I want to talk and put it forth to the group today how we might be looking at that from our local regional perspective. So Amy, not to put you on the spot, I'd love to start with your thoughts on these topic points and this theme. Well, let me help you. Let's talk a little bit about your research, right? And let's talk a little bit about how your research in these predatory tracking projects has blossomed into partnerships with your colleagues at UNC Wilmington and NC State.
Yeah, so we had plans to expand the project across the state. A part of the research that we're doing is looking at zoonotic diseases. And so we are collaborating with the University of Tennessee, and we actually send a portion of our scat samples there so they can test for specific diseases. There's a faculty member there who is looking at some canid specific diseases and how they may be changing, how coyotes and possibly domestic dogs are becoming more resilient to distemper. Less resilient to distemper. So not the vaccines not being as effective from what I understand. And so I feel like anytime we have an animal in hand and we're collecting information, I feel like it's very important to make sure we collect all the information we can. So we do collect ectoparasites. So we're looking at how many ticks are coming off these animals, what those species are, a variety of different things, and that all relates to zoonotic diseases. And so a big part of it is education as well. So a lot of, I think sometimes when you get into more of these urban settings, people think it's somewhat harmless to leave food out for their pets or to feed raccoons that are cute and cuddly and might come up onto their porch. I know when we bought our house, we had a note from the previous owner that said, you have a pet cat and he comes and eats the food at this time. Here's some bowls and cat food. And don't worry, the raccoons come up and finish it later. And so for me, it's a huge issue in terms of transmitting rabies and all kinds of things. And so the disease component, I think for my work is shown in a couple of ways. One, the work that we send to University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and they're working with folks at Clemson and a variety of different places as well. But then also I look at illumination, and so moon phase and how bright the night is or is not. And a big part of that is understanding what time of day animals are active. And so some of you may have seen the fox that are around campus. We're really seeing coyotes haven't been here that long in North Carolina, just the past 30 years. And so they may be in garages of downtown Chicago and parking garages, but we don't see them in parking garages in Silva. And why is that? And are we moving to an area where we may see that in the future? We just don't see it yet. And so what we're seeing right now is the fox populations are becoming very urbanized, and they're becoming more, they're becoming closer to houses and structures, whereas the coyotes are staying more in the forested areas. But how does illumination deal with that? So if you're putting your porch light on at night, is that attracting animals to your area if it's really dark out and they normally would not be out at that time, but now your porch light is allowing them to see a little bit better, and allowing, it's just changing that environment enough to where you're almost inviting them into your area. And so I think a lot of times people see an animal out in the daylight that is normally crepuscular, or they think kind of a nocturnal animal, and their number one fear is rabies. And part of what we want to look at is if the animals are partitioning resources to not be as active when maybe a dominant carnivore is active. And maybe that's why we're seeing signs of fox out during the day when we normally might not, or 30 years ago, we wouldn't have seen them out during the day. So does it have something to do with illumination, artificial illumination, or illumination of the moon?
You brought that up. I had read some research recently about the nighttime illumination from urban areas and from neighborhoods impacting migration patterns. I mean, even down to the level of insects, i.e. fireflies being able to connect and mate. So no, I think that this is spot on with our topic. Do I have any other of our faculty members who want to comment and talk about this topic and the goals surrounding it? Go for it, Sarah.
I'll just add a little bit. So this theme, health and well-being, partnerships, and regional impact our engagement. I think this is something that Western does really well, and it's something that brought me here. Partnerships are crucial. So instead of just kind of doing our own things in our little boxes, as we often do, it seems like a lot of us here in this call are really engaged with people across campus, and also in our communities. So in our Design for Health project, for example, I'm working with interior design, social work, nursing, and nutrition. And we've so we have now a group of 16 or 17 students from that kind of interdisciplinary lens, and we're all learning from each other. And we've partnered with this awesome nonprofit called Circles of Jackson County, and we are engaging with clients and addressing some of their home health issues. And as Erin was talking, money is a really crucial factor, but also kind of understanding what some of the problems that we can solve even with a small amount of money. And there are a lot with both design and the health principles. And we're trying to bring in other community partners to really address these housing and health problems in the region. And it seems like there's a lot of excitement around it. So we're hopeful that it will continue to grow.
Wonderful. Heather May.
Hi, yeah. So to kind of spin off of what Sarah was talking about, in ceramics, we are really grounded in community engagement and service learning with our ceramic work, which is really nice that the students in the ceramics field, actually artists globally in ceramics are all about networking and mentorship and helping out communities, the worldwide community, basically. So we take part with some of our community partners to help raise funds, like Haywood Pathways Empty Bowls event is happening next week. And Haywood Pathways, we help to raise money for the adult emergency shelter and the halfway housing, the soup kitchen, those kinds of ideas. And the students get to learn about these entities. And we're partnering closely with Lane Perry and on that project, and Silva Community Tables Empty Bowls is a really popular one. We have a new project that we're starting this year that we hope to kick off in late April, early June. We're still kind of working on it, but Lane Perry and my advanced ceramics class has hooked up together to create a new project, which is to support the Waynesville Sunrise Rotary Club in their efforts to financially support community-based projects that serve youth programs, scholarship, technology resources, mentoring, food insecurities and poverty issues, food and gardening, to environmental awareness and impact efforts like restoration, planting, and tools. In Waynesville, that's this new 50C13 entity from the Rotary Club that that Lane is a member of. So we are going to be, we're currently designing mugs in the class that we will sell at a coffee shop. I can't remember the name of it, in Waynesville. So look in the future for that, because we're really excited to partner with this new entity and to help raise funds for such great new entities and old entities in our area to really support our region. I've been in contact the past couple of weeks with all of the alumni that I can find that have been ceramic engaged. Alumni from before I was even born, which is really exciting. And we have our first online Mudcats meeting next week, where we're going to engage with current students and alumni from the years past. And some of those alumni have committed to helping to donate bowls and cups for these projects as well. So really trying to foster that mentoring and community along with the alumni engagement as well.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. Any other comments on this topic before we round out with our closing question?
I just wanted to add up something that, when you talk about partnerships and community engagement, the regional impact. So as science faculty, we help a lot with our K-12 science projects, and Western Carolina is really good at doing that. All the science faculty, most of them are judges at the Western Regional Science Fair. So we try to engage with our school systems here, and then try to promote their science education.
And hopefully spurring on the love of science for several of these folks. But again, I'm still with you, Heather May, on wanting to add the A in the STEM. I'm there. Amy?
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Probably another thing on one of the initiatives that WCU does, which is related to Lane Perry's work as well, is those service learning courses. And so we do have 2 service learning designated courses here now, and Lane Perry has been great with getting the ball rolling on those. But our applied GIS courses, we're able to reach out to the community and see just kind of what their needs are. A lot of times, if it's Fish and Wildlife Service or Forest Service, they have a designated GIS specialist, but they are so busy that, kind of these little side projects are things that are perfect for the students to do. And usually when they know their product is going to be used by somebody, they put a little bit more work and effort into it. So that service learning aspect that WCU does, that I just think is great. But it also allows us to go beyond this local scale. And instead of using, for example, our research data that's local, this year we're working with the Adirondack Loon Conservancy up in New York to look at the lakes in New York and kind of describe them in ways that may be important for loons. So what's the average slope along the shoreline? What's the greatest length of the lake? And so students will be working on that. They're working with the Orca project out in Washington, and taking citizen science data that goes back all the way to 2005 and digitizing that data so they can start doing analysis and seeing just what's going on with orcas, if they're arriving into the Salish Sea a little bit earlier, a little bit later. What else are we working on? A bunch. Those are two good examples. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, and I think that is amazing connection between the local scale and projects that incubate here and then find their way into other people's realms and have such purpose. I think our students really need to realize that this work, and oftentimes y'all are working with students on these projects, undergraduate or graduate students, and that those have real impact, that they're not just doing it for an A or a B or whatever. It's real life, real impact. I would love to go ahead and we're a little bit past our timeline, but if you can stay on the line with us, I'd love just to post this last question to the group and see if I've got any takers on it. I'd love to know what y'all have found to be the greatest setback amidst this pandemic for your research, for your academic and creative scholarship pursuits. And at the same time, what has been your greatest triumph?
Do you mind if I go first?
Go for it.
All right. So we do laboratory research, laboratory science is part of what we do. So it was a challenge. This gave us an opportunity to rethink about how we can do science in the laboratory with safety guidelines and everything. So one thing that came good out of this is that we started looking for new methods. Like I started working with computational chemistry protocols, developing computational chemistry, which is a really highly demanding area in the world, developing drug design, a material development type. I never thought about that to be used like to this level, but with the pandemic, we started doing computational chemistry, and with the help of the IT here, we developed a system that students can work from home, working on some projects, which is more like data crunching, data analysis. But we were able to do some sort of that work as part of the SERP program also in the summertime. So that's a good thing. I think now we are in a time that we need to think about doing things in different ways. Like one example would be like, if I have a student who could not attend a class one day due to some other reasons, I probably would not have thought about how I can help that students in the past, but now I can think about how we can do with this all video lectures and live Zoom meetings. So I think that set up a good opportunity for all of us.
Great example, Chana, and thank you so much for your time. Others?
I can go quickly. So my greatest setback in terms of research during COVID has really been just finding time because everything we do switched. I taught online last semester for the first time. I didn't teach face-to-face. And so that was a whole new learning process for me. And I enjoyed it very much. And I learned so much out of it. So I was really glad to have that opportunity. But of course, because I spent so much time on like learning a new modality of teaching, I didn't have as much time for research. So that really has been for me, I think, the most challenging thing. And similar to Chana, the greatest triumph is learning new ways to do things. So as I was trying to put together my online class, trying to design it last semester on water politics, I was trying to think of ways I could have the students engage with the material and not meet face to face. And so I went out in search of all these new data sources that I didn't even know existed. I found a ton of new resources that I can now use in my own research. And they've inspired all of these new research projects, that I have on my list now to dive into. And so, yeah, it's certainly a difficult and challenging time, COVID, but there are some new opportunities and amazing opportunities that have come out of it, and ways to innovate and ways to do things differently.
Great. Thank you, Jen.
I can echo most definitely what Jen said. I think I saw us all nodding, and that's definitely one of the biggest challenges that I found. There was plenty of research to still be done, but it seems the time just diminished exponentially as we started having to pivot and shift and learn new technologies and figure things out. And so I think that was likely my biggest challenge as well. But the triumph that comes out of that is when you learn how to do things in a different manner, it really does open up the outside of the box thinking. I can't count the times over the years that I've said, we can't do it that way. We've never done it that way. And no, actually, that's not correct. We just haven't thought about how to better do it that way yet. So I realized that, quite honestly, I thought I was a little bit more stuck in my ways, if you will. And, this pandemic really did show me that we can all be a lot more flexible than we originally thought that we could. And in the encouragement of thinking outside of the box, we've discovered all of these tools that were there all along, but we didn't need them. We hadn't had a reason to go out searching for them yet. So I'm excited about the new tools that are in my toolbox that I didn't previously have before the pandemic.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, I can definitely echo that in my work as well. It was challenging in the beginning to think about how to do ceramics online. Obviously, you really can't do ceramics online. You're teaching about a subject. You're not teaching the subject. But I did come up with a really great project that I had never tried before, and put my vulnerability cap on, and we did claymation. And the projects were spectacular. We had a ton of people tune in to the first Claymation Fest that we had at the end of the semester. And this semester we're doing it again, but I got so much good feedback from other people around the college wanting to partner with us. So we had a professor from theater come in on Zoom and talk about voiceovers and storyboarding. And then we had a professor from graphic design come in and talk about the digital literacy bit. And now we're working on claymations that have to do with some of the topics actually that are listed that we're talking about today, with diversity, inclusion, and politics, and what's going on in the state of our world. So it kind of comes full circle. I wouldn't have done a lot of the research that I did this year if I didn't have that time. And there was a point where I just couldn't do studio work. I just couldn't figure it out. There was something I just couldn't get myself to do it. And I just started reading and reading and reading. And that really helped the research to really take off. And then I got the bug and started doing some of the surfaces on my work, and figuring out the pride pots, and figuring out what I wanted this body of work to say and where that research was going to go. So this whole pandemic has shifted my life for the better in every possible way that I can think about, from personal to scholarship to teaching. And it's really kind of crazy to think about that. But I think that ceramics has thrived in the pandemic.
I think that's really amazing. And I'm so happy that you shared that really open moment about putting your vulnerability on the line. I've had that same experience through this process too, and my colleagues who I would have never shown my softer side or more vulnerable side have now been able to see that. I.e., Nelson, you got to see me yesterday in the mommy disheveled look, no makeup, hair a mess, and trying to keep it all together. So thank you, Heather May, for being a strong voice to say that is okay to share. Anybody else before we sign off? Sarah.
So the pandemic hit when I was in my first year here. And I was really in that data collection stage, just getting started. Heather May knows the last in-person thing that I did was come to take my class to her ceramic studio. And, we took some measurements, and then, the whole world shut down. And so that's been a huge challenge. But I think in particular, the Design for Health project that I've worked on, that we had one meeting in person and the pandemic hit, and this just seeing how resilient the students were. We had about 12 to 15 students involved last year as well, and they just kept at it, and they were part of the creative process of how the project was going to go, and they really helped us shape what it looked like towards the end of the semester or end of the year. And we were still able to engage with clients, and we're doing the work. And so just kind of thinking about things a little bit outside of the box. We do have a couple of forums coming up where we're inviting experts from around the region to talk about Appalachia and health and history and culture. And we can do that, and we can offer that to so many more people now because it is going to be on Zoom rather than just here in person where not everybody can get to Cullowhee all the time. So it's been a whirlwind, and I try to be patient and kind to myself because it didn't look like what I thought it would be, but I'm really excited about the future.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. And I love the point that you're making too about the accessibility to put our students in touch with these experts, now that it's okay to have an expert come in via Zoom instead of burning those fossil fuels to get them here to campus. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to contribute?
No, I think most of what I would say really echoes what everybody else says in terms of the challenges. It was a big shift for all of us, and we have 2 young ones at home, which I know some of the rest of you do as well. And so figuring out how to add homeschooling into research and reshifting and redoing all of your classes, it was just a little crazy. We also had it's called the Southeastern National Wildlife Conclave Conference, and we were set to host that conference. It's over 400 students from across the entire Southeast. And we canceled the event 12 hours before everybody was supposed to get in a van and come here. So Richard Starnes called me and said, "What's your plan right now?" I said, "Well, we sent an email out." The governor basically announced, made an announcement. And I said, "Well, we basically sent an email out and only half the schools can come. So we probably are going to have to cancel." But echoing what Sarah said, what's come out of that is at the time we said, we'll host in 2021. Well, that would be next month, and that's not going to happen either. So what we decided to do this year was make it a national event. And so they're usually regional. And so students can be exposed to things from, research that you might do, research techniques in Washington. So from across the whole country. So students will be able to compete against other students from across the whole country and just give them a lot more exposure to a lot of different things and allow them to network with faculty that aren't so local, because a lot of our students do like to go west and experience that type of work for a while. And so I think that's one really good thing that's come from it. But I will say it is great to be back face to face, because the reason why we're all here is to interact with those students, and talking to a bunch of black screens is just tough sometimes. And so being able to see them face to face and interact with them and have them in the field and give that experiential learning has really been great. So, and all the things that we've learned, I still like a good mix.
Well, and I think you're talking to the fact that we are also the students' greatest models of how to persist and keep moving forward. I think that's been my mantra for this past year is persist and keep moving forward, even if it's one day at a time or 1 hour at a time. Well, that is about all the time we have today for this discussion. And so, Nelson, I want to hand it over to you if you have any closing remarks that you'd like to provide this great group and to our audience who's tuning in. Before I do that, I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining us in this conversation today. I really appreciate your dedicated time and all the work that you do for our students in our university.
Yes, I want to thank you everyone as well to participate in the roundtable and all the audience to stay with us a little bit. I want to close with just think about what the pandemic has made us become. We are becoming global citizens. We are becoming citizens of the whole world where we need to work together to achieve sustainability in all the possible different ways that we have seen today and talked today about it. So keep working towards that goal and stop thinking about only yourself and only on what you are doing here and start thinking about what we are doing in the global concept in the whole world.
And for those of you out there who would like to learn more about the proceedings of our 2021 Virtual Research and Scholarship Conference, please join us at research.wcu.edu/RASC. Again, research.wcu.edu/RACE. Thanks for tuning in. See y'all.